We come to chapter 37, in which we hear how Nicholas is eager to begin his work in the Cherubil Brothers counting house, and how he is invited to a celebratory meal in honour of two anniversaries. The first being the birthday of Tim Linkinwater, the elderly clerk, and the second, rather more sombre anniversary, the remembrance of the day when the Cherubil Brothers' mother died. The square in which the counting house of the brothers Cherubil was situated, although it might not wholly realise the very sanguine expectations a stranger would be disposed to form on hearing the fervent praises bestowed upon it by Tim Linkinwater, was nevertheless a sufficiently desirable nook in the heart of a busy town like London. There was scarcely an object in the office, animate or inanimate, which did not partake of, in some degree, of the scrupulous method and punctuality of Mr. Timothy Linkinwater. Punctual as the counting-house clock was, which he maintained to be the best timekeeper in London, the old clerk performed the minutest actions of the day and arranged the minutest articles in the little room in a precise and regular order, which could not have been exceeded if it had actually been a real glass case fitted with the choicest curiosities. Paper, pens, ink, ruler, sealing wax, wafers, pounce box, string box, firebox, Tim's hat, Tim's scrupulously folded gloves, Tim's other coat, looking precisely like the back view of himself as it hung against the wall, all had their accustomed inches of space. Except the clock, there was not so much an accurate or unimpeachable instrument in existence as the little thermometer which hung behind the door. There was not a bird of such methodical and businesslike habits in all the world as the blind blackbird who dreamed and dozed away his days in a large, snug cage. He had lost his voice from old age years before Tim first bought him. There was not such an eventful story in the whole range of anecdote as Tim could tell concerning the acquisition of that very bird, how, feeling compassion for his starved and suffering condition, he had purchased the bird with the view of humanely terminating his wretched life, but how he determined to wait 3 days and see whether the bird revived, and how, before half the time was out, the bird did revive, and how he went on reviving and picking up his appetite and good looks until he gradually became what you see him now, sir, Tim would say, glancing proudly at the cage. And with that Tim would utter a melodious chirrup and say, "Tick, tick, tick." And Dick, who for any sign of life he had previously given might have been a wooden or stuffed representation of a blackbird indifferently executed, would come to the side of the cage in 3 small jumps, and thrusting his bill through the bars would turn his sightless eyes towards his old master, and at that moment it would be very difficult to determine which of the two was happier, the bird or Tim Linkinwater. It was a sight to behold Tim Linkinwater slowly bringing out a massive ledger and day book, and after turning them over and over, and affectionately dusting their backs and sides, open the leaves here and there, and cast his eyes half mournfully, half proudly, upon the fair and unblotted entries. "You will begin here, and we will see how you get on. 440 upon the May of next year, said Tim. Many new ledgers since then. 440 Tim closed the books. Come, come, said Nicholas. I am all impatience to begin. Tim Linkinwater shook his head with an air of mild reproof. Mr. Nickleby was not sufficiently impressed with the deep and awful nature of his undertaking. Suppose he should make a mistake. Suppose he should have to scratch it out. Young men are adventurers. It is extraordinary what they will rush upon sometimes, without even taking the precaution of sitting himself down upon his stool, but standing leisurely at the desk, with a smile upon his face, actually a smile. There was no mistake about it. Mr. Linkinwater often mentioned it afterwards. Nicholas dipped his pen into the inkstand before him and plunged into the books of Cheeryble Brothers. Tim Linkinwater turned pale, and tilting up his stool on the two legs nearest Nicholas, looked over his shoulder in breathless anxiety. Brother Charles and Brother Ned entered the counting-house at that moment, but Tim Linkinwater, without looking round, impatiently waved his hand as a caution that profound silence must be observed, and followed the nib of the inexperienced pen with strange, anxious, and eager eyes. The brothers looked on with smiling faces, but Tim Linkinwater smiled not, nor moved for some minutes. At length he drew a long, slow breath, and, maintaining his position on the tilted stool, glanced at Brother Charles, secretly pointing with the feather of his pen towards Nicholas, and nodding his head in a grave and resolute manner, plainly signifying, "He'll do." Brother Charles nodded again and exchanged a laughing look with Brother Ned. But just then Nicholas stopped to refer to some other page, and Tim Linkinwater, unable to contain his satisfaction any longer, descended from his stool and caught him rapturously by the hand. "He has done it," said Tim, looking round at his employers and shaking his head triumphantly. "His capital B's and D's are exactly like mine. He dots all his small i's and crosses all his t's as he writes it. There ain't such a young man as this in all London," said Tim, clapping Nicholas on the back. "Not one. Don't tell me the city can't produce his equal. I challenge the city to do it." Having thus expressed his sentiments of approval concerning Nicholas' ability to do his work very acceptably, Mr. Linkinwater gave vent to a short laugh. Turning again to his desk, quietly carried 76 from the last column he had added up, and went on with his work. "Tim Linkinwater, sir," said Brother Charles, "give me your hand, sir. This is your birthday. How dare you talk about anything else till you have been wished many happy returns of the day, Tim Linkinwater. God bless you, Tim. God bless you." "My dear brother," said the other, seizing Tim's disengaged hand, "Tim Linkinwater looks 10 years younger than he did on his last birthday." "Oh, Brother Ned, my dear boy," returned the other old fellow, "I do believe that Tim Linkinwater was born 150 years old, and he's gradually coming down to 25, for he's younger every birthday than he was the year before." "So he is, Brother Charles, so he is," replied Brother Ned. "There's not a doubt about it." "Remember, Tim," said Brother Charles, "that we dine at 5:30 today, instead of 2 o'clock. We always depart from our usual custom on this double anniversary, as you very well know. Mr. Nickleby, my dear sir, you will join us. Tim Linkinwater gave me your snuff-box as a remembrance to Brother Charles and myself of an attached and faithful rascal, and take that in exchange as a feeble mark of our respect and esteem, and don't open it until you go to bed, and never say another word upon the subject, or I'll kill the blackbird. A dog! He should have had a golden cage half a dozen years ago, if it would have made him or his master a bit happier. Now, Brother Ned, my dear fellow, I am ready. At 5:30, remember, Mr. Nickleby. Tim Linkinwater, sir. Take care of Mr. Nickleby at 5:30. The company at dinner consisted of the brothers Cheeryble, Tim Linkinwater, a ruddy-faced, white-haired friend of Tim's, who was a superannuated bank clerk, and Nicholas, who was presented to Tim Linkinwater's sister with much gravity and solemnity. The party now being completed, Brother Ned announced that he would ring for dinner. And dinner being shortly afterwards announced, led Tim Linkinwater's sister into the next room, where it was set forth with great preparation. Then Brother Ned took the head of the table, and Brother Charles the foot, and Tim Linkinwater's sister sat on the left hand of Brother Ned, and Tim Linkinwater himself on his right, and an ancient butler of apoplectic appearance and with very short legs took up his position at the back of Brother Ned's armchair, and waving his right arm preparatory to taking off the covers with a flourish, stood bolt upright and motionless. "For these and all other blessings, Brother Charles," said Ned. "Lord, make us truly thankful, Brother Ned," said Charles. Whereupon the apoplectic butler whisked off the top of the soup tureen and shot all at once into a state of violent activity. "Brother Charles, my dear fellow," said Brother Ned, "there is another association connected with this day which must never be forgotten, which never can be forgotten by you and me. This day which brought into the world a most faithful and excellent and exemplary fellow, Tim Linkinwater. This day took from it the kindest and very best of parents, the very best of parents to us both. I wish that she could have seen us in our prosperity and shared it, and had the happiness of knowing how dearly we loved her in it, as we did when we were two poor boys. But that was not to be." And standing, holding his glass aloft, he said, "My dear brother, to the memory of our mother." Good Lord, thought Nicholas, there are scores of people in their own station, knowing all this, and 20,000 times more, who wouldn't ask of these men to come to dinner because they eat with their knives and never went to school. But there was no time to moralize, for the joviality began very briskly, and the decanter of port being nearly out, Brother Ned pulled the bell, which was instantly answered by the apoplectic butler. "David," said Brother Ned. "Yes, sir," replied the butler. "A magnum of the double diamond, David, to drink the health of Mr. Linkinwater." "Certainly, sir." Instantly, by a feat of dexterity which was the admiration of all the company, and had been annually for some years past, the apoplectic butler bringing his left hand from behind the small of his back, produced the bottle with the corkscrew already inserted, uncorked it at a jerk, and placed the magnum and the cork before his master with the dignity of conscious cleverness. "Ha!" said brother Ned, first examining the cork and afterwards filling his glass, while the old butler looked on complacently and amiably, as if it were all his own property, but the company were quite welcome to make free with it. "This looks well, David."
"It ought to be, sir," replied David. "You'd be troubled to find such a glass of wine as ours is our Double Diamond, and that Mr. Linkinwater knows very well. That was laid down when Mr. Linkinwater first come, that wine was, gentlemen."
"No, David, no," interposed brother Charles.
"I wrote the entry in the cellar book myself, sir, if you please,"
said David in a tone of a man quite confident of the strength of his facts.
"Mr. Linkinwater has only been here 20 years, sir, when that pipe of Double Diamond was laid down."
Tim Linkinwater was somewhat abashed, but everybody stood and drank his health. Brother Ned, first of all. "Tim Linkinwater, sir, your health. Devil take her, Tim Linkinwater. God bless you." And so the evening went on. At 10:30, late hours for the square, there appeared a little tray of sandwiches and a bowl of bishop. And then when 11 struck, Tim Linkinwater's sister declaring that she ought to have been at home a full hour ago, a coach was procured into which she was handed with great ceremony by brother Ned, while brother Charles imparted the fullest directions to the coachman, and besides paying the man a shilling over and above his fare in order that he might take the utmost care of the lady, all but choked him with a glass of spirits of uncommon strength, and then nearly knocked all the breath out of his body in his energetic endeavours to knock it back in again. At length the coach rumbled off, and Tim Linkinwater's sister being now fairly on her way home, Nicholas and Tim Linkinwater's friend took their leaves together, and left old Tim and the worthy brothers to their repose. As Nicholas had some distance to walk, it was considerably past midnight by the time he came home, and he found his mother and Smike sitting up to receive him. It was long after their usual hour of retiring, and they had expected him at the very latest 2 hours before, but the time had not hung heavily on their hands, for Mrs. Nickleby had entertained Smike with a genealogical account of her family by the mother's side, comprising biographical sketches of the principal members, and Smike had sat wondering what it was all about, and whether it was learnt from a book or said out of Mrs. Nickleby's own head, so that they got on together very pleasantly. Nicholas could not go to bed without expatiating on the excellences and munificence of the brothers Cheeryble, and relating the great success which had attended his efforts that morning. But before he had said a dozen words, Mrs. Nickleby, with many sly winks and nods, observed that she was sure Mr. Smike would be quite tired out, and that she positively must insist on his not sitting up a moment longer. "A most biddable creature he is, to be sure," said Mrs. Nickleby, when Smike wished them good night and left the room. "I know you will excuse me, Nicholas, my dear, but I didn't like to do this before a third person. Indeed, before a young man it would not be quite proper. Though really, after all, I don't know what harm there is in it, except that, to be sure, it's not very becoming. though some people say it is very much so, and really I don't know why it should not be, if it's well got up. The borders are small plaited, of course. A good deal depends upon that. With this mysterious preface, Mrs. Nickleby took up her nightcap from between the leaves of a very large prayer book, where it had been folded into small squares, and proceeded to unfold it and tie it on, talking away in her usual discursive manner all the time. "People may say what they like," observed Mrs. Nickleby, "but there's a great deal of comfort in a nightcap, as I am sure you will confess, Nicholas, my dear, if you would only have strings to yours and wear it like a Christian, instead of sticking it on the very top of your head like a blue-coat boy. You needn't think it unmanly or quizzical to be particular about your nightcap, you know, for I have often heard your poor dear papa and the Reverend Mr. what's his name, who used to read prayers in that old church with a curious steeple with the weathercock where it was blown off the night before you were born. I have often heard them say that young men at college are uncommonly particular about their nightcaps, and that Oxford nightcaps are quite celebrated for their strength and goodness. So much so, indeed, that the young men never dream of going to bed without a nightcap, and I believe it's admitted on all hands that they know what's good and don't coddle themselves." Nicholas laughed, and, entering no further into the subject of this lengthened harangue, reverted to the pleasant tone of the little birthday party. And as Mrs. Nickleby instantly became very curious respecting it, and made a great number of inquiries touching what they had for dinner, and how it was put on the table, and whether it was overdone or underdone, and who was there, and what the Miss Cherybles said, and what Nicholas said, and what the Miss Cherybles said when he had said that, and Nicholas described the festivities at full length, and also the occurrences of the morning. "Late as it is," said Nicholas, "I am almost selfish enough to wish that Kate had been up to hear all this. I was all impatience as I came along to tell her." "Why, Kate," said Mrs. Nickleby, putting her feet on the fender, and drawing her chair close in as if settling herself for a long talk, "Kate has been in bed, a couple of hours, and I'm very glad, Nicholas, my dear, that I prevailed upon her not to sit up, for I wished very much to have an opportunity of saying a few words to you. I am naturally anxious about it, and of course it's very delightful and consoling to have a grown-up son that one can put confidence in and advise one. Indeed, I don't know any use that it would be in having sons at all, unless people could put confidence in them." Nicholas stopped in the middle of a sleepy yawn as his mother began to speak, and looked at her with fixed attention. "There was a lady in our neighbourhood," said Mrs. Nickleby. "Speaking of sons puts me in mind of it. A lady in our neighbourhood when we lived in Dawlish. I think her name was Rogers. Indeed, I'm sure it was, if it wasn't Murphy, which is the only other one I remember. I have—" "Mother," said Nicholas quietly, "is it about this lady that you wish to speak to me?" "About her?" replied Mrs. Nickleby. "Good gracious, Nicholas, my dear, how can you be so ridiculous? But that was always the way with your dear papa, just his way, always wandering, never able to fix his thoughts on any one subject for 2 minutes together. I think I see him now," said Mrs. Nickleby, wiping her eyes, "looking at me while I was talking to him about his affairs, just as if his ideas were in a state of perfect conglomeration. Anyone who had come in upon us suddenly would have supposed I was confusing and distracting him, instead of making things plainer. Upon my word, they would." I'm very sorry, mother, that I should inherit this unfortunate slowness of apprehension," said Nicholas, kindly, "but I'll do my best to understand you if you'll only go straight on." "Your poor dear papa," said Mrs. Nickleby, pondering. "He never knew till it was too late what I would have had him do." This was undoubtedly the case, inasmuch as the deceased Mr. Nickleby had not arrived at the knowledge when he died. Neither had Mrs. Nickleby herself, which is in the same part an explanation of the circumstance. "However," said Mrs. Nickleby, drying her tears, "this has nothing to do, certainly nothing whatever to do, with the gentleman in the next house." "I should suppose that the gentleman in the next house has little to do with us," returned Nicholas. "There can be no doubt," said Mrs. Nickleby, "that he is a gentleman, and has the manners of a gentleman, the appearance of a gentleman, although he does wear smalls and grey worsted stockings. I don't say why he shouldn't. There may be an eccentricity, or he may be proud of his legs. The Prince Regent was proud of his legs, and so was Daniel Lambert, who was a very fat man. He was proud of his legs. So was Miss Biffin. She was no," added Mrs. Nickleby, correcting herself. No, I think she only had toes. But the principle is the same." Nicholas looked up, and quite amazed at the introduction of this new theme, which seemed just what Mrs. Nickleby had expected him to be. "You may well be surprised, my dear Nicholas," she said. "I am sure I was. It came upon me like a flash of fire, and almost froze my blood. The bottom of his garden joins the bottom of our garden, and of course I have been observed by him several times from the bottom of the garden, as he was standing amidst the scarlet beans in his little arbour, or working at his little hotbeds. I used to think that he stared rather, but I didn't take any particular notice of that, as we were newcomers, and you might be curious to see what we were like. But when he began to throw his cucumbers over the wall—" "To throw his cucumbers over the wall?" repeated Nicholas, in great astonishment. Yes, my dear," replied Mrs. Nickleby, in a great serious tone. "His cucumbers over the wall, and vegetable marrows likewise." "Confound his impudence!" said Nicholas, firing immediately. "What does he mean by that?" "Oh, I don't think he means it impertinently at all," replied Mrs. Nickleby. "What!" said Nicholas. "Cucumbers, vegetable marrows, flying at the heads of the family as they walk in their own garden, and not meant impertinently? Why, mother—" Nicholas stopped short, for there was an indescribable expression of placid triumph, mixed with a modest confusion, lingering between the borders of Mrs. Nickleby's nightcap and the rest of her head, which arrested his attention immediately. "He must be a very weak and foolish and inconsiderate man," said Mrs. Nickleby. "Blamable even, at least I suppose other people would consider him so. Of course I can't be expected to express any opinion on that point, especially after always defending your poor dear papa when other people blamed him for making proposals at me. And to be sure, there can be no doubt that he has taken a very singular way of making his proposal. And to a certain extent, of course, that is a very flattering sort of thing. And though I shall never dream of marrying again with my dear girl, like Kate, still unsettled in life, Surely, mother, such an idea never entered your brain for an instant," said Nicholas. "Bless my heart, Nicholas, my dear," returned his mother in a peevish tone, "isn't that precisely what I am saying to you, if you would only let me speak?
Of course, I never gave it a second thought, and I am surprised and astonished at you that you should suppose me capable of such a thing. All I say is, what step is the best to take, so as to reject these advances civilly and delicately, and without hurting his feelings too much, and driving him to despair, or anything like that? My goodness me!" exclaimed Mrs. Nickleby, with half a simper. "Do you suppose that he was going to do anything rash to himself? If I refuse him, maybe he will, and maybe I will never be happy again, Nicholas." Despite his vexation and concern, Nicholas could scarcely help smiling as he rejoined, "Now, do you think, mother, that such a result would be likely to come from the most cruel result?" "Upon my word, my dear, I don't know," returned Mrs. Nickleby. "Really, I don't know. I am sure there was a case in the day before yesterday's paper, extracted from one of the French newspapers, about a journeyman shoemaker who was jealous of a young girl in an adjoining village. But she wouldn't shut herself up in an airtight 3-pair-of-stairs charcoal hut and burn herself to death with him. So he went and hid himself in a wood with a sharp-pointed knife, and rushed out as she was passing by with a few friends, and killed himself first, and then all the friends, and then her. No. Killed the friends first, and then herself, and then himself, which is quite frightful to think of." "Somehow or other," added Mrs. Nickleby, after a moment's pause, "these things go on in France, you know, and they always happy to the handkerchiefs which are cast away in grief." "But, mother, this man, who is not a shoemaker, what has he done, mother? What has he said?" inquired Nicholas, fretted almost beyond existence. But looking nearly as resigned and patient as Mrs. Nickleby herself. "You know there is no language of vegetables which covets a cucumber, or converts it into a formal declaration of marriage." "My dear," replied Mrs. Nickleby, tossing her head and looking at the ashes of the grate, "he has done all that, and said all sorts of things." "Is there no mistake on your part?" asked Nicholas. "Mistake!" cried Mrs. Nickleby. "Lord, Nicholas, my dear, do you suppose I don't know when a man is in earnest?" Well, muttered Nicholas. "Every time I go up to the room," said Mrs. Nickleby, "he kisses one hand and lays his hand on the other one on the heart. Of course it's a very foolish thing of him to do, and I dare say you'll say it's very wrong, but he does it very respectfully indeed, and very tenderly, extremely tenderly. So far he deserves the greatest credit, because when he puts his hand upon his heart, he does so very tenderly, extremely tenderly. And I believe he deserves the greatest credit. There can be no doubt about it. Then there are the presents which come pouring over the wall every day, and very fine they are too, very fine. We had one of the cucumbers at dinner yesterday, and I think of picking the rest for the winter. And last evening," said Mrs. Nickleby, with increasing confusion, "he called gently over the wall as I was talking to him, and proposed marriage and an elopement.
His voice is as clear as a bell or a musical glass, very kind and very like a musical glass indeed. But of course I didn't listen to it. Then the question is, Nicholas, what, my dear Gran'ther brought to me? Does Kate know of this? Asked Nicholas. I haven't said a word to her about it yet, answered his mother. Then for heaven's sake, rejoined Nicholas, rising, do not, for it would make her most unhappy. And with regard to what you should do, my dear mother, do what your good sense and feeling and the respect for my father's memory would prompt. There are 1,000 ways in which you can show your dislike of these preposterous and doting attentions, if you act as decidedly as you ought, and they are still continued, and to your annoyance, I shall speedily put a stop to it myself. But I should not interfere in a matter so ridiculous and attach importance to it until you have vindicated yourself. Most women can do that, but especially one of your age and condition in circumstances like these, which are unworthy of any serious thought. I wouldn't shame you by seeming to take them to heart or treat them earnestly for an instant. Old idiot, old idiot. So saying, Nicholas kissed his mother and bade her good night, and they retired to their respective chambers. To do Mrs. Nickleby justice, her attachment to her children would have prevented her seriously contemplating a second marriage, even if she could have so far conquered her recollections of late husbands who have very strong inclinations that way. But although there was no evil and very little real selfishness in Mrs. Nickleby's heart, she had a weak head and a vain one, and there was something so flattering in being sought and vainly sought in marriage at this ever special day, that she could dismiss the passion of the unknown gentleman quite summarily at first. As to it being preposterous and doting and ridiculous, thought Mrs. Nickleby, communing with herself in her own room, I don't see that at all. It's hopeless on his part, of course, but why he should not be, or why he should be, an absurd old idiot, I confess I don't know. He is not to be supposed to know that he is hopeless, poor fellow. I think he is to be pitied. Having made these recollections, Mrs. Nickleby looked in her little dressing-glass, and walking backward a few steps from it, tried to remember who it was who used to say that when Nicholas was 21, he would have more the appearances of her brother than her son. So, not being able to call the authority to mind, she extinguished her candle and drew up the window blind as to admit in the light of the morning. It's a bad light to distinguish objects in, said Nicholas. It's a bad light to distinguish objects in, murmured Mrs. Nickleby, looking out of the window at the light of the morning, which had by this time begun to dawn. And my eyes are not very good. I was short-sighted from a child, but upon my word, I think there's another large vegetable marrow sticking at this moment on the broken glass at the top of the wall.